This video is sponsored by my lovely patrons. When I look at Baekhyun from EXO, I think to myself, there's someone who knows how to be famous. He seems to handle everything with so much ease and charisma, is always working, but also doesn't take things lying down. He even went on to sue his label, SM Entertainment, one of the biggest in the business, as well as start his own label, INB 100, for solo activities. And I think one major factor to his success and ability to cope with fame is ironically due to the more rigid and abusive K-pop entertainment model that he leans into, in that he views himself as an employee to his fans, and he doesn't mind that. At least publicly, he's okay with seeing himself as a worker who owes his fans his time and energy and would rather compromise his own vision and what he wants to make musically for what his fans and the public expect of him.
그러니까 내가 좋아하는 음악만 하지 말고 나에게 듣고 싶거나 그리고 나에게 바라는 모습들을 보여줘야 하는 것도 우리 직업 특성상
필요한
정말 맞는 부분이라고 생각을 해서
Some might view that as a cynical cash grab. Of course, he just wants to make money, but I personally think it speaks to the culture that he's famous in, where artists feel that they owe their success to their fans and that should make them happy as part of their job as entertainers.
월드 투어를 하게 된 계기도 미주, 유럽, 그 남미 이쪽에 이제 계신 분들이 굉장히 많이 기다렸을 텐데
많이
기다리는 것에 이제 너무 이제 힘들어 하실까봐 이번에 이제 찾아가게 되는 건데 그래서 오시면 제가 행복하게 해드려야죠. 또 제가 이번에 기다린 만큼 이제 다른 원기옥을 또
Something we would see as toxic fan culture and parasociality in the US is seen as a social expectation and responsibility in South Korea, at least for that subset of K-pop artists. However, we should be cautious to overgeneralize and romanticize. What outlook helps one artist might be detrimental to another. There's no one-size-fits-all, and this shouldn't be taken at face value as the secret to understanding fame. And actually, if you know K-pop, this type of fan culture leads to entitled and toxic fans, as well as stifles what artists can do creatively. But rather, I think it's interesting when juxtaposed to how we view fame in the US, where fan and artist relationships are more like take it or leave it, or if you can't love me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. Yes, we make music for the fans, we love the fans, but we're people too. We make music for us, and music that's real. But even that can't be taken at face value, because then it leads to this idea that K-pop artists are all manufactured and fake, and everything produced in the US is authentic, or at least that's what the public demands. But for some reason, international fans are okay with not expecting authenticity from K-pop idols, and it's like, are we really going to unpack this? Yes, we are. But before we dive headfirst into this topic, I want to say that this video is going to encompass a variety of topics. Yes, it's going to be about how we frame fame when it comes to K-pop and the US pop industry and why those false dichotomies are false and how the reality is much more nuanced, but I also want to discuss how the outsourcing boy bands argument falls flat when you bring up girl groups, and how in actuality K-pop labels are looking overseas to create global girl groups with US and Korean performers as well as performers from other nationalities and ethnic and racial backgrounds, like with the girl group Katseye. So are we really outsourcing anything, or are we being outsourced? Additionally, we'll delve into the ethical concerns when it comes to reproducing a known toxic work culture in the US that were raised when the documentary about Dream Academy debuted on Netflix entitled Popstar Academy Katseye. Personally, the entire series just gave me flashbacks of the other Netflix documentary, American Factory, in which a Chinese company comes into the US to exploit the US auto workers the same way the Chinese workers are, but how the Americans don't take it. But in the documentary about the survival show entitled Popstar Academy, which was produced in part by HYBE, it's a bit harder to say the least to parse out what the docuseries was trying to say and what went down, but we'll get into that in part 2. But before I start, I just want to say this is not the end-all be-all of K-pop discussions. These are just my thoughts and opinions. I don't have the final word on anything. Like you, I'm just a fan and I just want to share my own point of view. So with all that out of the way, let's go. I think the author, Lucy Ford, of the article Why Did We Start Outsourcing Our Boy Bands is just genuinely confused as to why K-pop is so popular if it's also so heavily manufactured and is just so shamelessly a product. In her eyes, it's a fair question to ask. Why do we want white artists from the US or the UK to be authentic, but don't mind that K-pop artists are inauthentic? Is it because of fetishization, she asks? Is it because we dehumanize them and are okay with them being exploited in ways that we wouldn't allow, in her words, Western artists to be exploited? Is it because there's a language barrier? Why is it okay for BTS to be quote-unquote fake, but 1D broke up because they wanted to pursue real music and individual careers? In her words, why did we get the ick about manufactured groups from the West? Taylor Swift will write albums that can be dissected line by line and traced as an autobiographical timeline, and singers like Lorde and Chappell Roan have been boosted by lacing their singles with personal vulnerability. When Western fans consume K-pop, are they engaging with it on its own terms or viewing it through a lens that allows them to accept labor practices they would condemn in Western artists? And quite frankly, I find this entire argument, though genuine, extremely patronizing as a K-pop fan. Firstly, the exploitation of the artists in K-pop isn't something that's not talked about. It's well known and something that most fans don't like and find abhorrent. And contrary to the author's belief, it doesn't make the artists that go through that grueling trainee process out as inauthentic, but rather even more authentic and real in that they did that. They worked so hard to be where they are that they should be rewarded. It makes us as fans admire them even more, at least in my experience. Seeing them go through the trainee process, at least when trainee videos and audition tapes are shared and in some cases on survival shows, and debuting and dance practices, and that evolution of the group draws people into them because we as fans can't even imagine how hard it is. But we can see the hard work they put in and we see it play out in front of us. We are rooting for them and it makes them come out as underdogs. In my opinion, the trainee process and manufacturing of a group is partly a marketing thing, but it's also partly how South Korean pop music executives have purposely taken a page out of Motown's book when creating singing groups. That type of transformation process appeals to the South Korean work ethic because it's seen as admirable. Why doesn't that type of cultivation process work when it comes to One Direction, the author asks? And it's like, it did though. One Direction had their time and then it ended. Also, 1D was formed by taking a bunch of solo acts and putting them together, and I don't think they even knew that they were going to be in a group. But anyway, even Lou Pearlman found huge success in the 1990s with a similar trainee process, so her argument that manufactured boy groups in the US and in the UK fail because we demand authenticity isn't very soundproof. Yes, it's true there hasn't been many white boy bands in a while making global headlines, but I don't think that's because we as US fans don't like curated pop music. Secondly, I find it funny that Ford thinks that Western artists are more authentic than K-pop artists or acts, especially when it's well known that the members of BTS, for example, have had a huge hand in shaping their image and sound. RM, for example, has the most songwriting credits on BTS's songs and collaborates with fellow bandmates J-Hope and Suga when creating music for the group. Additionally, Ford in her article doesn't mention how in the US, audiences used to love these star transformation stories that were standard during the golden age of Hollywood, how new celebrities would be given new names and new hairlines and straighten their teeth, how they'd be signed to a single studio under strict contracts, etc. They also don't mention how this was standard fare through the 1960s with Motown Records employing a trainee process and even album photo cards. Many have already pointed out how SM Town, one of the biggest names in K-pop, sounds eerily similar to Motown. American audiences have always loved manufactured music and celebrities, even when the golden age of Hollywood ended and TV became the new medium of entertainment that supposedly gave Americans authenticity. Much of it was just a farce of reality. I think of Uncle Walt and Walt Disney's TV specials and how he invited us into his home to get to know the real him, or even JFK and Nixon's presidential debate, and how much more poised and real JFK looked next to the awkward Nixon. It's all performative, but many I guess take it at face value, which makes me wonder, did the author ever question the nature of their reality? Does she think US music is just authentic by proxy of being American or from the imperial core? When it comes to the US pop scene, there's only manufactured authenticity. There's moments of clarity, and I think celebrities are becoming more assertive, as they should, about their rights. On the other hand, I think you have to be pretty naive to think any artist in the US pop scene isn't manufacturing and selling you their brand. We as fans like to believe that artists would only put out music that they believe in or care about, but it's all about personal branding, and I think most people know that their favorite artists, whether it be Billie Eilish or Sabrina Carpenter or even Benson Boone or Taylor Swift, are selling products, and that they don't actually know them as well as they'd like to believe. Ford generally comes into this article with a lot of presuppositions that many fans of US pop have, in that we don't want to be bamboozled.
You don't want to be bamboozled. You don't want to be led down the primrose path. You don't want to be conned or duped. Have the wool pulled over your eyes. Hoodwinked. You don't want to be taken for a ride. Railroaded!
We want to believe that we're smarter than all that marketing riffraff, and that we'd only consume real music from real artists that are in the game not for the money, but because they love it and they love us. But in reality, though there are some who genuinely love what they do, they have bills to pay. team and crew members on payroll. They know that they have to play a part, fit a mold, and move product. When it comes to K-pop stars, a lot of the time you know they love it because they don't get paid as much, especially ones that don't reach global stardom. They are employees at a company with strict contracts and at times have to pay back their trainee dues, and worse still, some groups and artists get their debuts canceled even after years of training. Even ones that do reach international fame have late paychecks. Baekhyun sued on the grounds that SM owed him money, and he was only able to sue because of his status and popularity. In the end, they reached an agreement and he was able to set up his own label for solo endeavors. Also, exploitation in the US music scene is still alive and well. As recently as the 2025 Grammys, Chappell Roan brought up how labels don't pay their artists a living wage. The author said we as non-Korean listeners grew out of exploitative business practices, but did we though? Again, I think it's the author's ignorance showing that she thinks K-pop fans are complicit in exploitation of their favorite bands while not demanding the same realness from them as we do from the US or UK acts, which is not true. I think a lot of K-pop fans do demand authenticity from K-pop idols, despite maybe not knowing the language, as well as are aware of how unjust the system is and vice versa when it comes to how celebrities and artists are mistreated in the US or UK. The author paints this false dichotomy that one is authentic and one is fake, or we're okay with the exploitation of K-pop artists but not US artists, when in actuality exploitation of creatives is still happening in the US and beyond, and we're not happy with it either. In the end, a lot of the essay seems like they just can't wrap their head around why K-pop is popular and why Western boy bands can't be as famous. Like, I'm sorry East Asian people are having their moment right now. I think it's fair to assert that US fans demand real music from their favorite pop stars and are disappointed when their music is more manufactured, but that also doesn't make the music K-pop artists make any less real. There are ballads and authentic moments and songs in K-pop, and it's not all what you see in viral music videos and music shows, but also that viral music still has artistic merit. Something being popular doesn't automatically make it bad. Additionally, plenty of US top hits are manufactured and no one cares, or maybe the listeners just take everything at face value and think the music is genuine, even when it's not, because the farce of curated authenticity is just that good. Who's to say? When it comes to framing fame, K-pop structures it much more like a job than something that you are. In K-pop, labels create artists and personas, and then the idols sell a version of themselves that they show to the public. And I think it's understood that who they are in music videos and on stage is only part of who they are and not their entire personality. The benefit of fame in K-pop is that it's understood that you're a performer, and that your actual persona is different from how you appear in full glam for a performance. Your job as an entertainer calls you to wear crazy hair and makeup and outfits, but your actual identity is something very different. And though there's a need from fans to know that person too, who's behind the makeup, and that can get pretty invasive and toxic to say the least, I think it's a pro to have that separation from your onstage self and your real or private self, because there needs to be that divide. In the US, for example, there's this idea that who you are in your music is you, and your private life can affect your personal life and vice versa, and that can get really messy in its own way. You can't be on all the time, you can't live up to both versions of yourself, and it's a huge pressure we put on celebrities in the US to be real all the time when that's not right either. On the other hand, that's a downside of being famous in K-pop. You have to be extremely secretive about your own private life. You can't share details about relationships. For a while, idols couldn't even have social media profiles. Everything you do has to be above board, because if it's found out that you're unworthy of fame for something even as being caught with marijuana or God forbid dating someone, it might ruin you. There's a separation, but it's a very fine line, and there's still incredibly high expectations for celebrities in both cultures. But going back to the article and the question of detachment non-Korean fans supposedly have to K-pop and that's why it's so popular, fans translate lyrics all the time. It's not like we don't know what they're saying. The same goes for TV show appearances and interviews. It's not like we never used Google before. Also, have you ever met a K-pop fan? There is no detachment. In fact, there are some fans who want to be so immersed in K-pop they teach themselves Korean. There is an element of fetishization in K-pop by non-Korean fans that should be reckoned with, but I also don't think that's the entire story, nor sums up why K-pop is so popular. Generally, I think the reason K-pop does so well is because of the aforementioned authenticity of the trainee and debut process, of wanting to see a group succeed, and the exploitation plays a factor into that, as sad as it is and as unjust as it is. If these K-pop idols and trainees were not as mistreated as they are, would we have that story to follow to keep us as viewers invested? Because to me, it's something that defines K-pop. I think that's actually the deeper question, and something that's perhaps more nuanced than just why is K-pop popular when there are not white and not singing in English. To conclude, the article comes off again as patronizing and kind of racist in that they just can't believe US or Western audiences are falling for this inauthentic K-pop bullshit while also putting unfair expectations on white homegrown artists. Poor them. The cherry on top for me is how then the author infers that K-pop fans are hypocrites for being complicit in worker exploitation, and it's just like, when it comes to why non-Korean boy bands like One Direction split up, I do think that has to do with a more individualistic mindset that is fostered in the US and in the imperial core nations. To quote the article, there is a collectivist ethics of valuing the opinions of others, humility rather than self-confidence, and putting the family and country ahead of oneself are still operating strongly in Korean culture and society, and this functions as a core principle in idol training, says Adam Jong, an assistant professor of Korean studies at Arizona, whose research centers around K-pop's history and labor and fandom. She says idols' highly regimented and managed behavior harkens to that collective understanding of responsibility and how one person's actions affect a whole. Not to mention, they do have contracts and it's hard to get out of one if you don't have financial and legal backing, especially when a lot of artists at the time of their training and debut are in their mid to late teens. And even when they're older, it's still hard to go against that group, that company, and the fan base. And this for me is a huge downside of how fame is framed under K-pop, in that you owe fans, in my opinion, too much. In recent years in the US, like I said earlier, there's been a push for artists and famous people to speak up when they feel like they're being harassed by so-called fans and paparazzi, and many have put down boundaries, which I think is great. But in K-pop, that's extremely difficult to do because they're brought up in an industry where fans are everything. Fans tell the company who's popular and who's not, who's worth investing in. They also spend a lot of their own time and money on albums, merchandise, and tickets with the expectation that the group will succeed, and notice their commitment, and that's all par for the course. Jong says in the article, in this way, the idol industry turns idols into products that promise happiness by producing and distributing love and closeness, while also setting certain labor expectations from the fan, who is normatively expected to perform constant engagement, which costs time and often money. There's this extreme parasociality for some fans because they're paying money and using their time to dedicate to their favorite idol and group that they get to have access to their private personas when that's not true. This has led to sesang fans or stalker fans that have caused real harm to idols, and that's not okay. And this happens in most music industries around the world, but it's very notable in South Korea because of how the fan culture is set up, in that it's the norm to always think about what the fans want and even compromise your own work to please those fans, not out of monetary obligation, but out of social obligation. It's too much social responsibility, or at least that concept becomes distorted under this light of fame. In my personal opinion, there are pros and cons to framing fame under each culture. In the US, the biggest pro is that you can be like, take it or leave it. This is me, this is real, this is the music I want to make, but with the caveat that this is also a product and I'm producing authenticity, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. The biggest con is that you have no private persona. You are who you are on stage. Who you are on stage will always be connected to who you are as a person. And though I think that's somewhat true in South Korea, especially when it comes to musical ability and that being tied to your worth, I also think there is a divide in that you are employed to do and act and wear and look a certain way, and that in real life you're not rocking blue hair and for women, sultry or sexy clothing. You might sing about X, Y, or Z, but you're not actually dating or kissing or doing anything bad. You're just acting and dressing this way because it's your job. That I think can be a big pro, but how much of a pro is it when it's done under conservatism? When you have to keep your life so under wraps that a single mistake could stain your reputation forever? What kind of life is that? I always find it funny to see EXO in their regular clothes and how they just are covered from the neck down. They don't want you to see anything. But honestly, good for them. I just think it's funny as a US fan that there's this big separation between their day-to-day lives and what they have to do for work and what they wear on TV or just in vlogs and dance practices. There's a big difference. To wrap up, there is no objectively better fame system, but I just think it's helpful to look at how we view fame in different cultures when it comes to understanding the popularity of K-pop, because I think overlooking these differences and those false dichotomies can lead to less than stellar think pieces. So like I said in the intro and part 1, a lot of Ford's argument falls apart when looking at manufactured and so-called inauthentic girl groups. Contrary to Ford's thinking that Western audiences crave realness from homegrown American musicians, Katseye, a global girl group made in part with South Korean studio HYBE and American studio Geffen Records, also known as Hyphen by some fans, has seen major success in the US and internationally. 3 of the members are from the US, breaking down the article's illusion that manufactured English music and groups have given Western audiences the ick. There's also Blackpink, one of the biggest girl groups in recent years, which is also an international group. Rosé was born in New Zealand and raised in Australia, and Lisa is from Thailand. Jennie, Lisa, and Rosé, all manufactured idols, have done English-speaking projects as well as made English music, and have become household names. How do you explain that other than, yes, they're that good? So in this section, I want to delve into my own thoughts about girl groups, the ethics of creating them, and why they are as popular as they are in both South Korea and internationally. So without further ado, let's go. This is anecdotal, but I was introduced to K-pop during 2nd Gen, and the first group I really fell in love with was SNSD. My bias was Jessica, who actually left the group in 2014, and was known for her cold appearance on TV, and was later dubbed Ice Princess. But anyway, when I first saw them at 15 years old, I was in utter awe. Not only was the music catchy and their dancing incredible, but I honestly had no idea that East Asian people could be that beautiful or cool. Like, representation was so abysmal in 2010 for East Asian people in the US, so K-pop was kind of my own escape from white-dominated American media, as it was for a lot of East Asian Americans. Even though I wasn't Korean and I still don't speak the language, and the K-pop idols I followed weren't for the most part of the diaspora and didn't realize the impact they had on Asian Americans, well, maybe Tiffany and Jessica did, K-pop mattered a lot to me. And some 15 years ago, I remember defending the inauthenticity of it to my family by saying how much they actually do care about their music and craft because of how many years they put into training and debuting, and how they're essentially always working. It's funny how US discourse around the popularity of K-pop hasn't really changed some 15 odd years later. But here we are, decades later, and K-pop is everywhere. And in some ways, I think it's helped normalize East Asian faces in non-Asian media, and in other ways, I feel like it's added to outsider fetishization. Now when people ask me where I'm from, they don't just ask if I'm Chinese or Japanese, they actually add in Korean as an option. I stayed out of the K-pop scene for a while after high school and college, but Blackpink brought me back in. They debuted in 2016, and by 2017, they were inescapable. When I started teaching English in Brazil that year, a few of my students already had their merch. There have been a ton of great videos about Blackpink and their controversies and histories, as well as concert movies and documentary style movies, so I won't delve into them too much, but I will say I think it helped that they were a international or global group in that there was a non-Korean member and that 3 of them spoke English. Despite what the article says about exotification being a reason why non-Korean people like K-pop, it actually helps when there isn't that language barrier or even cultural barrier when getting to know a group. You think from the author's writing that fans only like K-pop because of the mystique of the East, if you will, but that's not entirely true. Most fans want to know the artist they're listening to on a deeper level, and having a diverse group helps that. Though I think it's important to note that 3 out of the 4 Blackpink members are Korean. It's not that diverse, but it was for the time. They also have had input in their own aesthetic. Balko, their stylist, said this about their famous deconstructed hanboks. The idea of utilizing hanboks first came from Blackpink member Jennie. While preparing the costumes, I didn't go for the traditional variety of hanbok. I kept the core spirit of the hanbok intact and fused it with elements of traditional Korean styling to create the final hanbok-inspired ensembles that you saw in the music video. And they've thrived from both embracing their Koreanness, but also from that global framing, illustrating how diversity, even the slightest bit, makes a huge impact and isn't a detriment for a group. And it should be noted that Blackpink wasn't the first or only K-pop group to include artists from the Korean diaspora. Like I stated, 2 of the members of SNSD were from the US. But since Blackpink, there's been other girl groups that have tried to have that more global edge, like Black Swan, which debuted the first African idol from Senegal, Fatou Samba. She also moved to Belgium as a preteen, and her family still lives there. The first Black K-pop idol was Alexandra Reid, or Alex Reid, but Fatou Samba is the first African-born K-pop idol. The group is also home to the first Indian K-pop idol, Surya Lanka. Leia, or Larissa, a Brazilian musician, was also part of the group until she left after rumored bullying by Fatou Samba and Younghoon, the group's leader, but it turns out that was a lie. I won't go into all the details here. Adiola Ash did a great breakdown of what happened, and it was also documented in the Apple Plus TV series K-pop Idols, but essentially during their first concert in Belgium, where Fatou is from, her family showed up to support her and then invited the group back home for food. This made Leia bitter because she was missing her own family and wanted to leave, but instead of communicating that, she went to the bathroom and then on Instagram ranted about how much fun she was having and made it seem as though the other members were excluding her. When her management team didn't take this seriously, her mother then decided to start rumors in fan forums saying that Fatu and Younghun were bullying her daughter. Leia then left the group altogether. It's very messy, and with different cultures come cultural clashes, but that is no excuse for not just being open and communicating how you feel. On the other hand, Leia is 6 years younger and therefore perhaps more emotionally immature and couldn't put her feelings into words. Being in a group with essentially strangers and even competition in your late teens and early 20s, Leia was 21 at the time, and being away from home is really hard. But that again doesn't excuse her or her mother's behavior at trying to make Fatu into a bully. Her mother is a grown-ass woman. The entire thing was made even worse for me because Fatu is the only black member in the group in an industry that is very anti-black. It's just so shitty that all of this had to happen, and Fatu opened up recently about how much that online hate mob hurt her mentally. Fans at the time were very protective of Leia because there have been Brazilian idols before her that have been mistreated. In particular, the first Brazilian idol, Victor the drummer, whose management company fired him only 3 weeks after his TV debut for breaking his drumstick during a live performance. Corona X Entertainment countered Han's claim on how he was fired from the company and got kicked out of the band, claiming that it was not due to breaking his drumstick, but due to his unpredictable and violent behaviors. Additionally, he also started a YouTube channel without telling his label. In 2021, the Seoul Central District Court sided with AMP Music, stating that Han will not be allowed any entertainment activities without the permission of his management. Subsequently, all of Han's social networking accounts, including his popular YouTube channel, Instagram, have all been shut down. So Brazilian K-pop fans were very keen to protect Leia as her bullying accusations came out in 2021, the same year as Victor's court battle. But still, that doesn't give Leia or her so-called fans a pass for harassing Fatu and in turn hurting her mental health, to say the least. There's justice in that Leia did leave the group and that Black Swan still has a dedicated fan base, but Leia and her mother still have done irreparable damage. In the end, I think having diversity in K-pop and music in general is very important and should happen, especially in girl and boy groups that work to represent a certain zeitgeist and make young people around the world feel seen. But it can't be sloppily put together. It can't just be a gimmick, and sadly, a lot of the time, it is. Black Swan was actually previously BP Rania, run by DR Music, that debuted the first black K-pop idol, Alex Reid, who suffered racism at the hands of her label and Korean society in general. She was at times dressed in different clothes from the other members and wasn't given proper training before debut. She said to Vice in 2022, "The most essential things were that I didn't learn Korean, the idol temperament, and all the little details of how to fit into the group before debuting. By skipping training, it put me in an awkward position to the rest of the group. It made me the exception, the lucky one who didn't have to do anything to be there." Essentially, the label set her up for failure. When asked for the best piece of advice she could give to aspiring idols who weren't of East Asian descent, Reid advises staying true to yourself, and above all, there will be a lot of pressure and a lot of times you feel like your dream is contingent upon conforming, but that's not the case. You can be yourself and your dreams can come true. Take what you learned and apply it to the next thing you do. You'll have a lot more discipline and worldliness, and you'll have more to give. Also, learn Korean. She has a great sense of humor despite the entire thing. But this goes to show what happens when Korean labels want to diversify, want to lean more into the US and larger global market, but don't want to put in the effort by supporting their foreign employees, specifically black artists. So now let's move on to the newest global girl group, Katseye. So the first thing you need to know about Katseye was how the group was born. There's a whole Netflix documentary you can watch called Popstar Academy Katseye, so I won't go too much into the interpersonal drama of the trainees too much, but rather I want to talk about the larger picture. So you have HYBE and you have Geffen, two record labels, one from Korea that created the one and only BTS, and one from the US that has helped shape Olivia Rodrigo's amazing sounding career. HYBE was looking to form a global girl group and decided to go to the US to do so and open auditions to the entire world. Over 120,000 applications were sent in. 27 trainees were picked between 2022 and 2023, with some training 2 years and others training for mere months. During this time, the girls, who ranged from 14 to 21 years old, were led on to believe that they were going to go through the traditional K-pop training process, and that yes, just 6 girls were going to be chosen, but it was going to be based on their hard work and also not publicly broadcast to the entire world. This was false. At the end of the summer of 2023, it was revealed to the girls that they were going to be a part of the survival show called Dream Academy, where their debut process was going to be online for everyone to see and vote on, and that their social media presence and engagement with fans was going to either hurt or help their chances at winning. When Missy, the senior artist operation officer at HYBE, said in the doc that they weren't going to tell the girls that this was a survival show, I couldn't believe it. I personally hate that it was hidden from them, and also that it was going to depend on social media and fan voting, because some of the girls already had followings online, and were scouted because of that. On the other hand, I get it, Bang Si-hyuk purposefully interacts with trainees not in person but on his laptop to see how engaging they are on screen. The internet is everything. But it just felt kind of unfair that the girls had to post online and try to become viral while also taking singing and dancing lessons, learning choreography and music, and going to school. Like, seriously? The finale of the show narrowed down the contestants to 2 teams of 5 girls each. There was the Dirty Water group consisting of Ezrella, Lara, Manon, Samara, and Sophia, and the Girls Don't Like group, starring Daniela, Emily, Marquise, Megan, and Yoonchae. In the end, the 6 contestants chosen to be a part of Katseye were Sophia, Daniela, Lara, Megan, Manon, and Yoonchae. And though this was the finale showdown, I actually think the decisions were made by Mission 3. Missy, who worked one-on-one with the trainees since before they were on air, stated she made the groups for Mission 3 with very specific intentions. She made one team with the younger trainees as well as the younger looking ones, Ua, Samara, Emily, Ezrella, and Ezrella was actually 20 at the time while the others were 15 and 17, to do a cover of Wannabe, where they were dressed to be cutesy high school students, while the other groups were more adult. There was the confident girl power group and then the sexy Buttons group, and I think that cinched the deal. When Buttons with Manon, Daniela, and Sophia, all winners, went viral, it was over. And in the end, I don't think HYBE, who was managing the trainee process, wanted cutesy, they wanted sexy, or more so, a mixture of sexy cute. And you can even see this with how there's only 2 black girls and 2 Indian girls in the trainee process, and each one was put in a different box based on their looks and even pitted against one another by fans, but understandably so since it was just so obvious what they were doing. Depending on what HYBE wanted in this hypothetical group, they had a younger looking Indian woman, Ezrella, even though she was older than Lara, the older looking trainee, who was seen by casting as more adult, and they had a younger black trainee, Samara, and an older black trainee, Manon. It wasn't subtle. Whoever was going to be the white or Asian members might have still been in the air after Mission 3, but in my opinion, Sophia, Manon, and Daniela going viral locked it in. The other 2 members in the viral video unfortunately didn't measure up in the eyes of HYBE and did feel a bit out of place in my opinion. I actually think a lot of the decisions were made even before the survival show aired. From the documentary, it was clear who they wanted. Yes, they all had to audition and go through the trainee process, but no matter what the survival show results ended up saying, they wanted Lara, Sophia, Daniela, and Manon from the get-go. And I'm still a huge fan of Katseye, knowing that all of this was like premeditated. I just wish it was more transparent. Rather than trying to frame it as like this battle of merit or objectivity in that the internet has spoken, therefore X trainee is better than Y trainee, just let it be known that this is all subjective. It depends on your background, your ethnicity, your camera readiness, your likability, your previous training as a child. It's so much more than just if you can do the moves and sing the songs. When it's a survival show, and even when it's not, more than just working hard and wanting it more than anyone else, there are real world biases that come into play with casting that cannot be overlooked. And it's annoying that it's postured in the opposite way, as if the entire process is objective. They even bring in an objective AI voice to do the eliminations because they want to put on this air of how this is all methodically and meticulously done. And actually, this BS is called out by contestant Lexi, who not only realizes how disrespectful it is that they don't even have an MC to deliver this very sensitive information, but actually leaves the entire competition because of how unfair and arbitrary it all is. And honestly, good for her. Some have said the joke's on her, she was gonna make it but she quit, but honestly I don't think she was gonna win, unfortunately, and she herself even said she didn't want to become a part of the group this way. And when I saw that moment, I couldn't help but think about the Cheetah Girls movie where they refused to become their label's puppets. Personally, I really admire Lexi for doing that, though some people could poo-poo it and even say she did it on purpose so she wouldn't actually get eliminated, and others just shame her for giving up. I think it's awesome that she called out the exploitation for what it was. Someone had to do it. Though she did miss a lot of rehearsal and her group didn't know if she was going to continue with the show for a while, which sucked, but in the end it didn't hurt them too badly since they didn't have to rework too much of the choreography, at least from what I saw on the documentary. And what Lexi did was great, not only for her, but also it asked a serious question to us as viewers and to her fellow contestants. If you continue with this competition, you're basically saying you're okay with being treated unfairly and the unfair treatment of your fellow trainees. You're saying you're okay with breaking people's spirits for a chance in this group run by these miserable people. And when I saw the winners get up on stage, knowing that Lexi, left and the reason she did, it made me wonder how the winners feel about their position and how they're viewed by the public. Do we view them as less moral, or do we think it's a competition? For winners to win, there has to be losers. That's just the way the world works, right? Wouldn't we do the same? Do we feel guilty for watching this competition where young vulnerable girls are put against one another for entertainment? And this isn't just a question for Dream Academy, but for all survival shows and competition shows that thrive on audiences laughing at the losers. I actually think there's been this large cultural shift to be kinder and more politically correct in competition shows, and the shows have been trying to balance this tightrope of still wanting to be edgy and mean and give Michael Kors-esque one-liners, but also trying to actually give constructive criticism and helpful feedback in a more generous way. However, though more helpful than a quippy joke, it doesn't make for good TV, especially in a genre where audiences like seeing people's work get shit on. So this begs the question, how does a survival show stay relevant in 2025 where there is this need to be politically correct and kind? I don't know, but I don't think Dream Academy made any big advancements, though there was the helpful vocal coach who did give meaningful advice and guidance. But generally, I felt the Netflix documentary as well as the actual reality show not really be critical at all of the trainee process. If anything, in my opinion, it was just unquestioningly seen as this is how the pros do it. This is how BTS does it. So the formula clearly works. Not to mention HYBE was one of the producers of the documentary, so it's hard to take it very seriously as a critique of the actual process. Though the documentary did highlight how strict and stressful the trainee process is, no phones, no social media, no breaking curfew, harsh feedback, long hours, and infighting, it showed these elements without too much pushback. The documentary also highlights how HYBE hired a therapist to help the girls with their mental health in both one-on-one sessions and group sessions, but those weren't very helpful in my opinion, at least the group ones weren't. Firstly, it was a male therapist talking to a bunch of teen girls. Secondly, there was a camera in the room during the therapy sessions. And thirdly, at times the therapy sessions, at least the group ones, seemed to be done in mean-spiritedness to air grievances at the other members, specifically Manon. The documentary crew did follow up with Naisha, a contestant that had to leave because she shared classified information on Instagram, and Adela, the first contestant to be eliminated during the survival show. And the crew gave them space to talk about their own feelings towards the K-pop trainee process. But these trainees were also known to bully or at least have negative feelings towards Manon. And throughout the entire docuseries, they did Manon dirty by needing to give her this redemption arc, as if she had to redeem herself in the first place. So I'm gonna pause here to look at this situation. I know people are tired of hearing about the controversies with Manon and the other trainees. That's fair, it's been 2 years since Dream Academy debuted and around 3 years since the training process, not to mention a year since the Popstar Academy docuseries aired. Manon is part of the group and Adela has her solo career. It's all water under the bridge. But I also think it's fair that people like me who are just discovering the group and the series have space to talk about their own thoughts, as it will always be part of their lore. So on one side you have people saying that Adela and some of the other trainees, and even Missy, the manager of the trainees, had a right to be mad at Manon. They've all been working their asses off for this dream, some for over a year, and it's something that kind of just happened to Manon as she was a scouted trainee. She did have to audition, but clearly didn't have a performance background and didn't realize how intense the training was at first. She didn't seem like a team player and was missing practices, supposedly putting her teammates in jeopardy, and was climbing the fan rankings for her pre-established social media following. Adela even mentioned Manon's pretty privilege. But Manon did admit that she was kind of thrown in there with no prior experience and that being in the academy kicked her ass into gear and lit a fire under her to prove them wrong. She's also in the documentary taking notes, and I guess if you look at it through this lens, Manon needed to be redeemed. And the Popstar Academy docuseries does give her that redemption. But in my opinion, she didn't need one. Yes, maybe it was wrong for her to miss a substantial amount of practice, but she was actually sick and sore. Yeah, other girls worked through that, but if HYBE supposedly cares so much about the trainees' mental health and physical health, why are they then being so hard on her? Also, imagine being one of the 2 black girls on the show, knowing there'd most likely only be 1 black girl in the final group. That's extremely stressful to think about. Of course, she didn't want to live in the house. Plus, she was 21, she wasn't a teenager. If living at her aunt's helped her mental health and meant that she wasn't breaking any more rules, what was the problem? Additionally, I don't think we should glorify overworking and overexerting ourselves. I know it's a competition show and that's the point. Rivalries and animosity towards one another is par for the course. It's a competition, you have to overwork yourself. It's fair to feel like someone's not pulling their weight and still being rewarded, but I feel like that's the system's fault and not the fault of the other competitors who have a right to take a break. Again, maybe it was inconsiderate of her teammates and she did change her attitude as seen in the docuseries, but I would counter no one would care if she was missing practice if she wasn't ranking high in the fan voting. She was real competition, and she was getting ahead by not working as hard, but in the end, you would only get mad at someone like Manon if you didn't see the larger system at play. K-pop and Hollywood have always been about beauty, and I think it's unfair to hate on Manon for something out of her control. And again, in the end, she pulled her weight and won. Maybe for some that's unfair, but when have competition shows ever been about fairness? I know that sounds really mean, and I don't blame the girls for not seeing the larger picture at the time. It's hard to see a system when you're in it, when believing in it means that fairness and justice still exist in the world.
So even when I was there, she wasn't showing up. She never does, and it's like she breaks the rules and she doesn't get penalized for it. Like now it's being completely ignored, and it's like, it's surprising because we naively thought something else.
I think it's fair that the other trainees felt resentful and angry. They were all just teenagers, or at least most of them, and young adults at the time. They're still growing. But Lexi did in the end see right through their BS. But I guess sometimes it's easier to hold a grudge over individuals than an entire system, especially the K-pop trainee system that's been revered and upheld for years at this point as the key to success. In the end, these types of shows don't come down to fairness and how hard you work or how much you want something. It's about what the higher ups want. And it's about privilege. And though Adele tried calling that out, and she has a right to do that, to me, it came off as ill-intentioned. As much as we want competitions to be fair and objective, they aren't. At least not in K-pop or in Hollywood. But going back to the documentary as a whole, it really reminds me of American Factory, where the Chinese billionaire who owns Fuyao Glass, Cao Dewang, decides to reopen an old GM plant in Ohio to manufacture glass for automobiles, using both Chinese and American workers and implementing Chinese business practices. It's the Americans who are being outsourced for their labor by the Chinese, rather than the other way around. And they have to cope with this new way of doing things, where they're expected to bypass safety regulations and declare their loyalty to the CEO and are expected to not unionize against unfair and unsafe business practices. It's interesting seeing Americans, and in the case of Dream Academy, people from all over the world, be put under different working conditions that are reserved for exploited Chinese and South Korean people, and they don't put up with it. In both cases, non-Chinese and non-Korean workers leave or are fired for speaking out. And in American Factory, the filmmakers take the American side in that they don't think it's right for workers to be treated in this manner, even though the Chinese workers are seemingly okay with their exploitation that they face in the US or in China. The documentarians know it's not right. Even though the Chinese workers say they feel like they're part of a team and have pride in their jobs and know their place, that's not something that we should aspire to. And even the Fuyao management is aware that we shouldn't acknowledge what we're doing to these people, even the Chinese ones. When one Chinese overseer says that they should make the Americans work overtime Sunday like the Chinese workers do, no one in the room is like, yeah, we should, or laughs along with him. There's an awkward silence because we're not exploiting them. We like working Sundays. That's not a punishment. To think of what they're doing as anything but noble is blasphemous and tears down the entire facade they've so carefully crafted. And vice versa, when an American manager says he wishes he could shut his workers' mouths with duct tape, and the Chinese boss doesn't laugh or find it funny, because that's not what this is. We don't actually abuse them. There's this unwillingness to acknowledge the unfair treatment in American Factory when it comes to Fuyao Glass by the Chinese higher-ups, either because they actually believe in the corporate BS or know they'll be frowned upon if they go against it. And I feel the same is true when it comes to Popstar Academy and Dream Academy and HYBE and Geffen and that whole thing. We're not exploiting you. We're unleashing your full potential. This is your dream, right? Wouldn't you do anything for it? And if you do call it what it is, exploitative, mean-spirited, wrong, well, that's just your opinion. After watching the docuseries, I couldn't help but finally understand why movies like Helter Skelter and Perfect Blue exist. I couldn't imagine the body issues, the comparison culture, how strenuous it is to have this mantra pushed on your head that is now or never. One of the talent agents say that when you have a 1 in front of your age, it's the perfect or best time to stretch yourself, and I couldn't help but cringe. When you have a 1 in front of your age, you should be chilling. You shouldn't have a single worry in the world. The fact that we live in a culture that's so obsessed with youth and exploiting youth is very damaging to all ages. At the end of the day, I think it's wrong to uplift the K-pop trainee system as the best way to produce and mold talent, just like it's wrong to say that workers in general should be overworked and underpaid in any profession. American Factory says that we should all be a little bit more entitled. Our bosses owe us for our labor, especially when they're billionaires. Whether you're Chinese or American, you have rights, and in the case of Dream Academy and trainees in general, they have rights too. It's just so sad that they're so easily exploitable because they're young and inexperienced and have such a drive and passion that they do anything to get this dream. It's a recipe for disaster. Yes, some people reach amazing heights through the system, but that's the exception, not the rule. When it comes to the final group that came out of Dream Academy, Katseye, they all look and seem really chill and happy for whatever that's worth. I personally don't get too involved in the personal lives of the musicians I listen to, but the members of Katseye are all very young and just starting out, and I can't wait to see what they do. I personally have loved the debut and Touch era, and this new era with Gnarly, like that was a cultural reset for me. What sold them on me though as a whole was the buttons cover. Like Sophia nailed that. Look at her elbows when she dances. Like how does she do that? You know, and she was sick during it. I also think their diversity isn't a gimmick or was sloppily thrown together, but very intentional. Though I will say I hate how they changed Sophia's nose. I know it might have been her choice to do that, and that's fine, it's her body, but I think they work in a very looks-oriented environment where appearances are everything and wide flat noses are not appreciated. Sophia is of course beautiful inside and out, before and after, but it makes me sad thinking about the kind of pressure they're under visually and aesthetically. I worry a lot about them having eating disorders because they have to look a certain way and be thin, and none of the trainees even were bigger, and that does hurt girls' feelings and self-esteem and give them distorted views of themselves and their bodies. And that's not Katseye's fault, but rather a byproduct of how thin we'll always be in, unless corporations change and are actually more inclusive of all body types. On the flip side, Manon has said that she does have full control over her hairstyles at least, and chooses to do her hair the way she wants to, whether it be in braids, straight or natural, though she did comment that it's painful to dance with braids and it does hurt her hairline. A cynical part of me wonders if this new push for diversity in girl groups is just so companies can't be accused of appropriation because they're diverse. They're only becoming more inclusive to move product and assuage backlash. But TBH, there's still appropriation in K-pop by Korean idols, so there might as well be some non-Korean girls, specifically Black and Indian girls, as the face of the music and getting their bag. Their diversity has also brought different dancing backgrounds to the forefront that have set Katseye apart, especially with Daniela and Sophia. I should also mention that 2 out of the 6 members have come out as part of the LGBTQ+ community, which is huge, and they even did a TikTok with Vivian Wilson, Elon Musk's estranged daughter, who's also trans, illustrating that their Tesla line from Gnarly was an ironic statement about the company and showing their support for their LGBTQ+ followers and fans. To wrap up, I'm a huge fan of girl groups, and Katseye is one to watch. Though made under dubious circumstances and HYBE, Geffen are to blame, I don't think the members should be punished, nor the fans who have rightfully called out the exploitation of K-pop artists and artists in the US and around the world for years now. So in this video, we discussed how South Korea and the US frame fame and the pros and cons of each, as well as discussed this article on outsourcing boy bands, which in the end just turned out to be a very ignorant piece written by someone who doesn't listen to a lot of K-pop or their fans. We also discussed girl groups diversity and the outsourcing of talent internationally by K-pop labels, and how that's helped make better music and more diverse groups, but how that diversity should always be done with intention. Protections for trainees and artists matter. They should be compensated for their time and effort and not be mistreated or taken advantage of because of their lack of experience, especially by multimillionaires. So that's it for this one. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please leave a like and comment and subscribe for more. And one last food for thought, though there's been a big push to diversify girl groups, boy groups don't have that pressure to diversify in K-pop, at least from what I've seen. Why do you think that is? And anyway, please remember that this video is not the end-all be-all of K-pop discussions. These are just my thoughts and opinions, so please be kind in the comments. So anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.